Saturday was Bryce Underwood's debut in Ann Arbor as a Michigan commitment. And it was just in time, too, because it was Michigan's final home game of the season. And in this video, I got the guy who was there to document it all on Saturday, Isaiah Hole of Wolverines Wire in the USA Today. But first, Michigan fans, do me a favor, smash that subscribe button to the best recruiting channel on all of YouTube, the On3 Recruits channel. All right, let's bring in Isaiah Hole. Now, Isaiah, I got to ask you, what you did on Saturday was phenomenal. I really enjoyed following your Twitter just as you kind of followed Bryce Underwood through pregame festivities and all that. It had to just be a surreal feeling to see him decked out in the maize and blue at the final home game of the season.
I think what was surreal about it is I didn't really start covering the Bryce Underwood recruitment until it was basically week 8, I think, was when I first kind of started to put my feelers out because I tend to be more team oriented than recruiting, but obviously bigger stories require some things. And it's just kind of like the Connor Stalions sign stealer scenario. That just kind of fell into my lap kind of similarly. Obviously, as we now know, Connor Stalions was the interim or acting offensive coordinator for Belleville, but he wasn't the first person to even say like, hey, I got to tell you a little bit about what's going on about this Bryce Underwood to Michigan thing. So it was just kind of surreal to kind of get to that point because obviously there were a lot of people, especially Michigan fans, that just didn't want to hear it, right? Like they just wanted to be like, you know, we're not getting him. So therefore I'm just going to go ahead and shut this down emotionally right now, right this moment. Yeah. And so it was kind of surreal just to see him finally on campus wearing maize and blue, walking into the stadium. He made an entry earlier than any other recruit I've ever seen, right? Like he was out like before all the players were even out for warmups. But just to see the hard work pay off and knowing kind of a lot of what went into it from Michigan's side and you know, being able to make this happen because even just I'd say the day before, I'm checking out LSU sources and kind of seeing what they have to say. And they certainly had no consternation that he was going to leave the class. So a huge win for Sharon Moore. And it was certainly one that was very meticulously planned by him and Sean McGee, the general manager.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, Michigan fans were just protecting their mental health for months on end, not really playing into the Bryce Underwood talk until it was real. And, you know, at the end, it all came together. On Saturday, the picture you took of Connor Stalions, the iconic picture that you took of Connor Stalions and Bryce Underwood, when they were walking around, who was more popular at the tailgates, Connor or Bryce?
Oh, it was definitely Bryce. It was so Connor was there earlier, and you know once I arrived and everything, because he gave me the heads up that Bryce was going to be coming to his tailgate. Normally, I'd arrive, go right to the stadium, and he's like, "No, you got to come to this tailgate.
Yeah,
Trust
you
me."
got to.
So I go there, and I see I see Connor, and before long, it's like we're talking, and guys come up and they want their picture taken with him, and they want to talk to him and everything like that, and they have no idea who I am, and that's fine. But then once Bryce came, it was something of a mob scene. So much so that even though they had kind of told everyone, hey, you got to be chill when Bryce gets here. Do not like basically tear him limb for limb because you're so excited that he's here. It was still like he came and he was introduced to the tailgate and then he walks out after that and everyone just kind of followed him. And the whole point of me being there essentially was to be able to get that iconic picture. Not to call my own picture iconic, but
it was.
I wanted to get a picture. I wanted to get a picture of those two together, just kind of knowing, their relationship. And it took like us kind of basically kind of batting people away, getting almost to the point where he was escorted off of the golf course before we were able to stage that picture. And took another one with the Underwood family and the entire Stalions family. I mean, it was a pretty wonderful moment just to kind of see those two families coming together. But yeah, Bryce was definitely the star of the show. I mean, he just has that kind of je ne sais quoi about him that, and you can see it even when you just see him at a Belleville game, come out of the tunnel. Like you can see it, like at the moment you're like, where's Bryce? Oh, there's Bryce. It doesn't take long before it just kind of emanates from him. And it was kind of the same thing, see him in person in civilian clothing.
Yeah, I mean, that photo, we're talking if Bryce goes out and wins a national championship in the next 3 or 4 years, like that photo that you took could be turned into a statue outside the stadium one day. We'll see what happens. All right. So you've been covering this program since about 2015. You've been covering recruiting. You've seen kind of the apathy around Michigan recruiting, especially in the NIL era. You know, there's maybe a little loss of interest from Michigan fans up until the Bryce Underwood flip. So how has the sentiment changed around recruiting in just the last 5 or 6 days?
It's changed enormously. Certainly now it's kind of funny going to I am a proud member of the Fort on the Wolverine.com on On3. I visit it multiple times a day just to kind of see what people are saying, right? Get the pulse of the fan base. I don't have a board of my own on my own site. So it's fun kind of watching it go from we're not getting Bryce to suddenly it being like, is there a chance that we could also flip Tavian St. Clair? Like it's not quite that like level, right? It's of like,
It's
okay,
getting
that
there.
hubris, but certainly there's a feeling that Michigan can now get in the game with anybody, especially once the revelation came that Larry Ellison was the benefactor for the Bryce Underwood NIL. So now everyone's like, we just went from like hoping we could be like a top 10 class or somewhere just around there to suddenly being like, could this be top 5? Could this maybe even be number 1? And I mean, it is just a world different. Like you said, the recruitments have been very apathetic to what Michigan's kind of had, right? Because I think you saw a shift in the early Jim Harbaugh era from the 2017 to the 2018 class. Weirdly, it worked out very, very well because you look at 2017 and you're like, man, that guy's going to be a star. That guy's going to be a star. They got 2 5-stars in that class, Donovan Peoples-Jones and Aubrey Solomon. They had multiple guys in the top 100. And it didn't really work out. You go through the list of commits, and all of these guys that you thought were kind of surefire blue chippers didn't really work out. But then you go to 2018, the top-rated recruit was Aiden Hutchinson. He was hovering around 100. I think he was just slightly below. And you go through that class, and it's like banger, 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 banger. Every single guy basically hit. You look at the bottom of the class. You look at Ronnie Bell and Jake Moody, both guys that were drafted to San Francisco 49ers, coincidentally. But you know, you just kind of go top to bottom, and they did a much better job, I think, of finding culture fits as well as maybe under the radar guys. And so with that, like people got more accustomed to those 3-star types, maybe being a little bit more prevalent. I mean, even some of the stars of this year's team, you look at Mason Graham. At the time of his commitment, a 3-star, ended up elevating to a 4-star. It was a flip from Boise State. You look at Kenneth Grant, a 3-star at the time of his commitment. Colston Loveland was a 4-star by the time he committed, but I mean, he was a guy that just kind of came out of nowhere from Gooding, Idaho. So there were certainly some stars. Donovan Edwards, a signing day commitment. He was a 5-star on one site and a 4-star on all the rest. So it was kind of difficult for Michigan fans to necessarily invest in the idea of having that high end talent. But now, clearly the strategy has changed inside Schembechler Hall, and I'm going to be really interested to see what they do from here, because I am been kind of led to believe that they aren't done in any stretch or imagination.
Yeah, and that leads me to my next question. Do you think that this mentality that we're seeing right now with the Bryce Underwood flip and everything that's happening in high school recruiting, is that going to carry over to the transfer portal? Is that going to carry over to 2026 class as well? Are they going to be as aggressive when the next cycle starts, do you think?
I do, because this was a mentality shift and a paradigm shift for Michigan. Talking to some of the people close to the program, it was a concerted effort by those within the program, with Michigan lagging behind in NIL with this idea of transformational over transactional. Like that could get you so far, but the landscape had completely changed around Michigan. And this year kind of serves as like, okay, so this is what happens, right? Especially because you start losing guys that are your more middling guys to other programs who are putting more into the NIL space. And there's just more parity in college football. That's why you can see in Indiana suddenly, kind of rise up and have a really great season, because they're able to maybe get some of those types of guys that would have been those a little bit more middle of the road developmental types of players. And now Michigan recognized that they had to kind of change the game internally. And that meant getting all the donors all kind of in line with one target, and doing so, they went with they said, well, we got to try to go after Bryce Underwood because he's a generational guy. He's a game changer. If we don't get him, at least it gets everyone in the NIL space on the same page. It galvanizes them. And yeah, I do believe that at this point, and you kind of saw it in the immediate aftermath, they went and re-offered 5-star edge rusher, defensive lineman, however you want to look at him, Jakeem Stewart out of Edna Carr in New Orleans. Who is a guy that LSU very much wants, and all these other schools. They made an offer to Isaiah Gibson from Warner Robins, Georgia. He's a Georgia kid committed to Georgia, another 5-star. That kind of tells you what the mentality is we are going to go after the top guys, or we want to send kind of some shockwaves throughout the college football system. And also because there's a recognition that there's some massive roster deficiencies at this point, kind of left behind by Jim Harbaugh, the timing of his leaving, maybe some lackluster recruiting. So that kind of changes a lot of the calculus of what Sharon Moore needs to do to kind of put his own stamp on the program. And I think that you're going to start seeing, like, when you start getting outside of the season, you got signing day coming up. What happens between now and then? You got the transfer portal just 4 or 5 days after that. I think it's going to be kind of shocking to the Michigan fan system because they're used to, like, okay, we're going to go and we're going to find a Josh Preeb and we're going to find like a CJ Charleston type, and maybe one will work out, maybe one won't. You look back at 2023, they obviously brought in a lot of guys like AJ Barner and Drake Nugent, guys that definitely Josiah Stewart, who's still having an impact. Guys that they were kind of snipers about that weren't necessarily like these high-end names. I think that you're going to see them going after some of those high-end names because now they feel like that's what college football is right now, and we need talent, so we're going to find ways to get talent on campus so that we can turn this around very quickly.
Yeah, an amazing turn of events for Michigan fans. Michigan recruiting has arrived. It's here in the NIL era. Isaiah Hole, I really enjoyed your documentation of Saturday. Kind of brought me, who's living in Nashville, Tennessee, to Ann Arbor. I felt like I was following Bryce Underwood around, so appreciate that. Tell the people where they can find your work.
You can find me. I'm the host of the Locked On Wolverines podcast, wherever you get your podcast, YouTube, audio, pretty much anywhere. And you can find me at wolverineswire.usatoday.com.
All right, Isaiah, thanks for dropping by the Inside Scoop.